This week on To the Contrary.
First, music star R. Kelly in the eye of the Me Too storm. Then, Congress has to adjust to members with young children. Behind the headlines, Iowa Republican Senator Joni Ernst. She talks to us about President Trump, Planned Parenthood, and working with her female colleagues across the aisle.
I'm Bonnie Urbay. Welcome to the Contrary, a discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. Up first, hashtag MuteRKelly.
It appears the Women of Color arm of the Time's Up movement is doing just that. R. Kelly's performance in the pre-Mother's Day Love Jam has been canceled. Kelly, the multi-platinum R&B idol, has been accused of sexual misconduct for many years. But he vehemently denies being violent and sexually coercive with women and young teenagers. That, despite settling lawsuits that go back to the mid-1990s. He was acquitted of child pornography charges back in 2008. That, for videotaping himself having sex with an underage girl. His alleged victims have all been women or girls of color. The latest cancellation brings the number of canceled shows to 10 since the grassroots social media and protest campaign began. Time's Up is also calling on corporations that work with Kelly to break those ties. In a statement, Kelly's representative said, quote, R. Kelly supports the pro-women goals of the Time's Up movement, end quote.
So, Congresswoman, are women of color who are assaulted or sexually harassed finally having their day?
Bonnie, as an African-American woman who is deeply involved in the sexual harassment issue in Congress, I am ashamed to admit that I had heard nothing of R. Kelly's sex crimes until now.
I agree. But I will say this is why I think it shows how important it is that people that are in a particular space or companies or industries, if they do know something, they have to be the ones to step up and say it.
Absolutely. And it reminds me of what's going on with Nike right now, right? So the exposure of that frat boy culture there that's so deleterious to women. The good news is, well, if there is good news, because the entertainment industry is so influential, I think a situation like this can be really helpful. But I don't think that women of color are finally getting their day. I think there will always be, I'm being cynical, but a persistent gap between the attention that white women may get and women of color. When in any measurable, women of color are always the last in line.
You know, I grew up hearing about R. Kelly, and I've listened to his music. My generation knows these allegations quite well, and we're not surprised about them. We are pleased that there is some justice coming, but this is just hopefully this is not just the only person in the entertainment business who's going to have their day of reckoning.
All right, but you know, R. Kelly obviously is very well known, but these allegations, it's reminiscent a bit of Harvey Weinstein because these allegations were around forever and ever and ever and ever, going back to the 1990s. So why now? And why now? Doesn't that say that women of color's voices who talk about being sexually harassed and assaulted are speaking up and are getting paid attention? Why doesn't that say maybe the gap is closing?
And perhaps it does, but I think you focused on the right thing. The women who have come forward have most often not been famous women. What has been famous is the man, and the man here happens to be a black man. So why didn't that come forward first? I must say that these are far more serious than any of the sexual harassment notions I have heard from other high-level folks, especially in the entertainment industry. And I must say he has had masterful counsel. He has paid off, apparently, people at such an early stage in the accusations. That's the only, why wouldn't I know about it?
Well, because a lot of the women I think that have filed charges against him, unlike Harvey Weinstein, these aren't famous women
That's
at
right.
all,
Yeah.
and they're young women,
Right.
and
you're
so their
you're
career
not
isn't going to be.
You're not reading the stuff online about R&B or hip hop.
Right, but their careers also were not being held up by him the way with Harvey Weinstein. A lot of women were scared to come forward. He'll kill my career. I'll never get another job. I'll never get another role. I'm not saying, but I'm just saying they're different in that respect. I mean, a lot of these young, they were like 15 years old,
Exactly.
16 years old, and unfortunately, if you throw enough money out there, you find attorneys that will do your business for you, and these young women probably didn't know where else to go.
Your thoughts about, women of color finally being listened to?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good that we have a voice and that people are listening. I do think that there's something about culture where it was accepted, where it was okay for you to go in here and to do this with an older man, and no one said anything about it. And if they did, maybe your mother got her house paid for, or your family members were paid off. I think now we see a cultural change where it's no longer we're going to look past the bad behavior because of your talent and your gifting and what you're doing for the Black community. All of a sudden, no, you need to have character and talent together, and I think that's important.
Well, and there's parallel with what's going on, right, with Bill Cosby, excuse me. So we have a Black man of eminent power and influence being held accountable for his actions.
But this is much worse.
But
worse.
is it? How about when are we going to see a white man who's been picking particularly on women of color? I mean, do we? Is that still so-called sacred territory that the media won't invade?
We have to wait for a situation like that to happen. But I think,
And people have to come forward.
and they have to come forward.
The interracial nature of it wouldn't bother me. What does bother me, and why I say it's worse than before, is that it looks like he favored juveniles,
Yeah,
Right.
people
He did.
underage, and
Yeah.
so it's not just women. He realized that these were crimes, and if there's money to be paid, pay it now. This man should be prosecuted. It's not simply getting a payoff here.
Or canceling his concerts.
Precisely.
But there still needs to be more done in the R&B community, in the music industry. He cannot be the only person who escapes or takes kind of the fall for everybody else. And I think we're not hearing enough about who else is misbehaving in this way.
And I want to jump to something that's been talked about the last week or so, not just in the context of women of color or men of color, but also all these men, all these powerful men who are being tossed off their thrones. What should be done with them now? Charlie Rose obviously is trying to make a comeback, or so he says. Should they be allowed to make comebacks?
Well, I don't think you can stop them necessarily from having a comeback. And no culture loves a comeback more than ours, right? So
Right.
that's a challenge.
Well, and redemption is something that everybody, I think, wants to be supportive of, but there's a difference between redemption and just comeback. Yeah. And I think, look, as long as folks have paid their due, whether it's they were taken to court or they've been taken out by their job, they have to live a life. And if the public wants to allow them back in, that will be up to the public.
Well, no comeback without an admission.
That's
It
right.
seems to me one ought to say, I did it, I was wrong, please give me another chance.
But you can't guarantee that. But I think what Congresswoman Holmes said is very, very important. Where there should be prosecution for these underage young women, there needs to be prosecution. And if we talk about these women, we didn't hear about it because they didn't matter, they weren't prominent. Again, it's going to be, of all the women in a room, it's going to be the younger women of color that are going to be the most vulnerable. And we have to keep that in mind.
All right. Let us know what you think. Please follow me on Twitter @BonnieRBay. From sexual harassment to Capitol Hill.
Congress meets the 21st century. When Illinois Democratic Senator Tammy Duckworth gave birth to a baby girl last month, she became the 10th woman to have a baby while serving in Congress. 5 of those women are still in Congress. Duckworth made history as the first female senator to become a mom in office. The first House member was Yvonne Braithwaite Burke of California. That was in 1973. Politico reports that the so-called Labor Caucus is bipartisan, with 6 Democrats and 4 Republicans.
So, Sam Bennett, since '73, when Representative Braithwaite Burke blazed that trail for the 10 women who have followed, there are now 11 lactation rooms in the U.S. Capitol. There are also a lot more women's bathrooms, including off off both chambers. What other kinds of changes do you think Congress needs to show to lead the country to being more family friendly?
Well, and if I can speak to the most important point of this, I feel, which is I think what's so important about having more women in elected office on both sides of the aisle and stop being ranked 84th in the world in the number of women in elected office, is these women, particularly these young working women with children, are normalizing, right? That you can work and you can have children and you can be a good parent. They're normalizing something which many women are conflicted about. So that's thrilling to me. When I ran for Congress in 2008, I had the honor of being supported by Kirsten Gillibrand, who was 8 months pregnant, right? And in the call time room with me, making calls while she was 8 months pregnant. I love that. I think some of the other changes that need to be seen are also the changes we need to see in corporate America, which is we need to have hours and flexibility that we all can have families and be good parents.
Is it realistic to have?
Well, it's not only not realistic, it's exactly what as feminists we said we are not asking for. We're not asking for you to change the way Congress operates. We're not asking for you to give us more vacations. The moment we do that, we are saying you need to do something special for women, and therefore there's a big excuse for why women shouldn't be elected in the first place. We need to do more for women, but that means they need more in supports. Not that we need to change institutions like, well, for example, the next support I would say is who is taking care of that kid? And this is how I would go at it. The reason I'm interested in who is taking care of her kid is what about all the women who work in the Congress? Who is taking care of their kids? Why isn't there some kind of daycare in the Congress for all of those women? Then maybe we can have women who are actual members get in on the act.
That's good.
Well, I mean, I think, we should look at it as what's best for families, dads and moms, right? And the reality is Congress is slow to change. But, I think this is not surprising. Government is often one of the slowest places to change, and they can learn a lot from what you see.
I mean, when you talk about integrating the military back in the
military,
30s
the few
and
places
40s.
They usually get it right. That you're right about that. I agree with you. But I mean, there are a lot of women in the workplace today, far higher numbers than you see actually in Congress, and they have figured a lot of this out. Not all of them, but a lot of companies have been on the front edge of how do we make our workplace more family friendly?
There's still only one.
Some of these women, we want them to stay because we like their talent and what they're doing.
But there still is 1 in 7 Americans qualifies for paid family leave, working for government or corporations. So I don't think that says that corporations are leading in any way, shape, or form.
But even though a lot of workers don't have paid family leave, they have access to paid time off, which they tend to use in different ways, whether it's vacation time mixed with paid family leave, FMLA. So there's a way of crafting that. And now, do I think we need to do much more? Absolutely. Which is why I'm encouraged to see conservatives coming to the table with some with reform ideas around paid leave that allow young workers to take time out of to be able to pay for their time out of the workforce, using Social Security, for example, and then delaying their retirement benefits later on. I mean, we need to have some market-based solutions to things like paid leave, to then start thinking about childcare costs. I do think, though, you're very right about normalizing the idea of having children and not having to drop out of the workforce, or if you're a low-income woman, going into unfortunately going on to paid public assistance because you can't afford that.
What an awful and stingy idea. Take it from your Social Security when most people on Social Security are not even getting enough to getting enough to get by in a rich nation, and the last of the rich nations not to offer paid family leave.
A rich nation that's $20 trillion in debt, I might add,
thanks to
and
your
that's
tax
only going to help. No, thanks to President Obama who got his $10 trillion in.
Oh, okay.
Let's
not go there. But we can all acknowledge that among all the rich nations, and we being preeminently rich among them with a much larger economy, we have the worst child care options for working parents. And you're right, Genevieve, it's not just the mother, it's the family. We have the worst, needs to be fixed. I agree with Congresswoman 100%.
But what do you say to conservatives who say that, somebody who doesn't have kids should not be taxed, people who have children should prepare for it, either have a friend or a parent who can take care of the kids while the parents work, or have one parent stay home if that's possible?
I've been a working mom for 40 years. 40 years I've been a working mom. in an unstretched, broken stream. And I can tell you what, I have never gotten any help from any quarter.
But no, it's not. Yeah, I know. But what I say to the conservatives.
No, let me finish my thought. I'm saying I should have been able to get help with that, but I wasn't able to.
Yeah, but most women
crazy.
aren't able to. What I would say to conservative women is you have the right idea about family, and in fact, getting help for these women will save us from what we're doing now. We're forcing women to go back to work too early just to make a living. And as a result, mind me, they are sacrificing their children because they should be spending more time at home with their children, and they would be if there was some paid family leave. And so let's join forces and get that in the name of the family.
All right.
We'll talk.
Behind the headlines, Senator Joni Ernst. The Iowa Republican is one of 23 women serving in the U.S. Senate, 6 of whom are Republicans. To the contrary, recently spoke with the senator who says she's crossed party lines to address issues such as sexual harassment and assault.
There are a number of bills that I have been working on. The campus sexual assault bill that I've been working with Kirsten Gillibrand of New York. I have a number of military sexual assault bills that I've worked on, not only with Kirsten Gillibrand, but Claire McCaskill of Missouri, but then also Jean Shaheen of New Hampshire and I are working on a resolution which would require an investigation of the Olympic Committee and, of course, all of the allegations that we've heard over the past year with Larry Nassar.
But Senator Ernst says it will take more than legislation to change societal attitudes and behavior. And she worries President Trump's rhetoric is an impediment to passing legislation and advancing the conversation about sexual misconduct.
Well, it does impact because we don't like rhetoric, and I think we all should be respectful of each other, regardless of race, gender. We need to be respectful. And so I would encourage others just to set a positive example.
The senator has also supported initiatives for paid family leave programs, as well as co-sponsoring legislation to close the gender pay gap.
I have joined with Deb Fisher on and making sure that women that are doing equal work are receiving equal pay. It is a big issue across society. So getting this through committee and taken up will be an important push forward. I'm also working on a national paid family leave initiative too. So we do want to support working women. We want to support families. These are all things that we should be able to come together as Congress and hopefully get onto President Trump's desk.
Senator Ernst would like to collaborate across the aisle on many issues, but not when it comes to Planned Parenthood. In 2017, she proposed legislation to defund the organization. But she still insists if the bill had passed, women would still have access to free health care and sex education.
We can do a lot of that through other existing organizations as well. One of those would be community health clinics. It is a stopgap measure that many of our states have in place already that provide reproductive services. They offer education in those areas. So there are many other organizations out there that exist. Most of them do not provide abortions. We want to make sure that we are adhering to the law and protecting women's health services while not using taxpayer dollars to fund abortion.
Senator Ernst is the first woman elected to Congress from Iowa, and she was the first female combat veteran elected to the U.S. Senate. She believes American women and men will reap great benefits with more women in local, state, and federal offices.
As we see more and more women getting into elected office, they will contribute to a wonderful collaboration of ideas and put forward their own strong initiatives. And I think that we can overcome a lot of our societal issues if we have a more balanced Congress. We really need to build confidence in women and make sure that they understand that they are viable candidates and they are needed as elected officials. So it has been a mission of mine to engage with different groups across Iowa and encourage not just Republican women or Democratic women, just women that if they are passionate, they should be engaged. So setting the example, making sure that women know that achieving great heights, they can do it.
So Senator Ernst, according to the website 538, votes with the president 91% of the time. Are you surprised she called him out on his rhetoric?
No. I think this is something we've all talked about before. That people separate earlier yesterday. That you know, a lot of people separate out where they agree with the president on policy from what they may like about some of his tweets, some of his rhetoric, and some of his behavior. I think the fact that she votes with him 91% of the time is a perfect example of that, because he does line up 90% plus of the time with pretty traditional conservative Republican policy positions.
I agree. She made the perfect demarcation. She was unequivocal in saying she did not support what he was doing with his tweets. And I must say, if I may give advice to my Republican colleagues, if they did more of that, I think they would have a better chance in the 2016 election. It's when you keep being apologetic, not meaning to, but in the words that seem to condone what he's saying, that you turn off independents, not just Democrats.
But when you have somebody like Senator Ernst, who will reach across the aisle, except when it comes to defunding Planned Parenthood, how much can she actually get done with Democratic women in the House and Senate?
I would embrace her. I would absolutely embrace her. I mean, for example, she and I may disagree on whether you're going to tell poor women that we're going to take from your Social Security so that you can get daycare. We may disagree on that, but even on that, maybe we can come to some kind of compromise. Compromise is a very important word, and here's a compromise on that. Okay, if you are a woman who makes above, let's take some astronomical amount, or maybe very high amount, then maybe we will let you borrow from your Social Security. But for the average woman, we understand that one of the things that is most important in the Congress today is that we're running out of funds to pay the baby boom generation, and you don't want to mess with their Social Security.
Well, I'm glad that we're coming to some agreement on the proposal that I was mentioning
a deal
earlier.
Right here.
I think that's fantastic, because it's really not a stingy deal, and you can set parameters around income requirements, and because it's progressive in terms of who gets what and at what point, people who make at the lower end get more than people who are at the higher end. So we can talk more about that. But I love the bipartisan nature that she's demonstrating, that we can come together on lots of core important issues. And
it's not just a lot of sweet talk, because sometimes she's also the one who said something about when she was running for office, making them squeal, making the Democrats squeal once she got to Washington.
She raised pigs. She's a hog farmer.
That's right.
Come on, that plays well in Iowa.
I mean, I think you know, in certain audiences, you need to speak in certain ways. But I mean, she's right about at the local level.
But doesn't that really mean you can say one thing to one audience and completely the opposite,
the content,
which is kind of not being honest with either audience?
Well, not necessarily, Bonnie. I mean, the content can be the same. Maybe the delivery is a little bit different. The way I talk to my family members or my friends when I'm hanging out is probably going to be a little bit different than I talk to you ladies while I'm on national television. But at the base of it is, I want to make sure that we can take care of ourselves, we can provide for ourselves, and that we are safe and secure. And you can get that message across in lots of different ways, and I think that's what she's articulating.
But I wouldn't hold her campaign rhetoric against her once she got into the Senate.
Well, and I think the most beautiful thing that we're seeing here is the bottom line fact that women are naturally bipartisan. That's why we need more women in elected office. But the problem is,
why is it, do you think, that she can reach across the aisle and work with Democratic women, but maybe two Republican senator cannot do it with a Republican.
You're talking about men now.
A Democratic senator.
You're talking about men
Women
now.
Can do it with
right.
women. Men can't do it with men.
No, men can't do it. The Winston McIntosh, Rachel's Network, she did that first original seminal study that showed that women had more in common with each other in terms of voting records than they had with their own parties. right? Women, Republican women and Democratic women, voted more in alignment than they did with their own parties on a selection of issues that wouldn't surprise you: the environment, education, health issues. And this is exactly why we need more women in office. The challenge is this: don't let this woman deceive you. Of the Congress that is now roughly, the whole Congress, Senate and the House, that's 30%, right? Only 6% are Republican. And that's a problem. We need more women from your side of the aisle. So I'm going to ask both of you to run for office.
All right. And that's, don't answer because we don't have time for it. That's it for this edition. Please follow me on Twitter and visit our website, pbs.org/to the contrary. And whether you agree or think to the contrary, see you next week.